Okay, today we're diving into one of the biggest industrial stories happening on the planet right now. We're talking about the European auto industry. For 100 years, it's been a global titan. But right now, it's facing the most profound and frankly dangerous transformation in its entire history. For over a century, if you thought about engineering excellence in cars, you thought about Europe. They were the undisputed kings of the road. But this isn't just another corporate story. What we're talking about is a foundational pillar of Europe's entire economy, and it is at a seriously dangerous crossroads. So, before we get into the crisis itself, let's just take a second to really grasp the sheer scale of what's at stake here. The industry is absolutely massive, and its health is directly tied to the prosperity of the whole continent. Just look at this number, 13.8 million people? That's how many jobs are connected to this industry. This isn't some abstract economic figure. We're talking about millions and millions of families. And it doesn't stop there. The auto sector contributes a huge 7% to the EU's total GDP. So you can see, when this industry faces a crisis, everybody feels it. Now, we all see the exciting headlines about electric cars, right? But behind that shiny, futuristic exterior, there's a series of really severe interconnected threats. So we're going to walk through 5 pretty sobering facts that reveal this hidden crisis. And we're starting with something called the EV value leak. Okay, so what this shows is fascinating and a little scary. A traditional gas-powered car, that's an IC vehicle, adds about 90% of its value right back into the European economy. Pretty good. Now, if you build a battery electric vehicle locally, that drops to 75%. Still okay. But look at what happens when that same electric car is imported. The value captured in Europe absolutely plummets to just 20%. This shows perfectly how the big push to electric could, weirdly enough, end up draining the economy. But the problem isn't just about what's being built, it's also about how it's being built. And that brings us to our second fact. A massive innovation chasm has opened up. This right here is a huge wake-up call. These new tech-first companies are bringing cars to market at literally double the speed and, get this, half the cost of the traditional European players. They're just using totally different manufacturing techniques and software development models that are completely rewriting the rules of the game. And those new rules apply to customers too. So the third sobering fact is that the old strategy, building one global car for the whole world, that's officially dead. Why? Because what people want in different parts of the world is splitting apart faster than ever. I mean, just look at the difference here. In China, 45% of people plan for their next car to be fully electric. In Europe, that's only 23%. And what about advanced driver assistance systems, or ADAS? More than 75% of Chinese buyers are into it, compared to just 40% of Europeans. This forces companies into a really expensive regional strategy, which completely wipes out the advantages they used to have for making millions of the same car. All right, let's move to our fourth fact. And honestly, this might be the most critical one of all: the battery bottleneck. This really paints a stark picture of Europe's vulnerability. As of 2023, China controlled over 80% of the entire global battery value chain. For the single most important component in an electric car, Europe is incredibly dependent. And what's worse, the big efforts to build a local supply chain are starting to stumble. Recent bankruptcies have actually caused almost half of the announced European battery capacity to just vanish. And it's not just the batteries. For the rare earth elements you need for EV motors, over 95% of the EU's supply comes from China. That is a massive, massive strategic dependency. Now, this crisis with the physical hardware has a really dangerous parallel in the digital world. Our fifth and final fact is that Europe has a critical software blind spot. The real race today, it's for coders, not mechanics. I love this quote because it just perfectly captures the problem. Cars are becoming software-defined vehicles. They're basically computers on wheels. The real battle is being won in the data center, and Europe is just falling behind on finding the talent it needs to even compete. And what this table shows is a huge talent gap. In these new rival companies, over 40% of the R&D staff are software specialists. At the traditional European car makers, it's only about 15%. This is a huge threat, because in the future, it's the software that's going to drive a vehicle's value, its features, and the entire customer experience. So, okay, after all that bad news, is there a way forward? Well, yes. Let's pivot now from the crisis to the response and look at a really comprehensive action plan that's been designed to try and save the industry. So the plan is built around a framework called ERA. It stands for Successful Economics, to make sure there are profits and jobs. successful resilience to build secure supply chains, and successful abatement, which is about hitting those climate goals. It's really a balanced approach to try and tackle all those tangled up problems we just looked at. So, how does ERA actually translate into action? Well, the strategy is broken down into three main pillars, and together they provide a blueprint for a potential comeback. The first pillar is all about transforming the companies themselves, pushing for radical new ways to be more efficient. The second pillar focuses on future-proofing the entire value chain, everything from raw materials to battery production. And the third pillar? Well, that's a call to action for policymakers to level the playing field, to tackle things like high energy costs and infrastructure so that European companies actually have a fair shot at competing on the world stage. And we're not just talking about vague ideas. The plan calls for really concrete, radical action, cutting costs and time to market to match the new guys, building a competitive EU battery industry basically from scratch, and mastering critical tech like software-defined vehicles, SDVs, and those advanced driver systems, ADAS. It also means securing a stable supply of 14 critical raw materials and launching a massive six-fold expansion of the public charging network by 2035. But even with a solid plan, the challenge ahead is just monumental. And it all boils down to a race against time. To put the scale of this into perspective, just look at this number. 350 billion euros. That is the investment needed by 2035 just for public charging infrastructure. And remember, that's only one piece of this enormous puzzle. And so, this brings us to the final critical question. The industry has a roadmap, but with rivals innovating at double the speed, can Europe's giants fundamentally transform themselves quickly enough to save their legacy? The stakes could not be higher.